Hey, this is the Master Blaster from Elk Grove, California, Spray Tech Finishing. This video is going to be, I'm actually going to work on some cabinets instead of just talk. I'm going to show you the process of what you do to your cabinets when they get in your shop or you're out in the field, what you do to them before you primer them. Yes, there is a process before you prime them if you want a top-notch finish. I'm not going to show you painting yet because I'm still coming up with a good way to film it in my spray booth. You got to watch the whole video because sometimes I go through a process like puttying up a cabinet. The reason is that's because me and my wife have been doing this for so long, it's like automatic. So we forget to mention some of the stuff we do. So if you don't watch the whole film, there's a good chance you're gonna miss something because when it comes back on, I'll tell what I missed in the one before. So yeah, watch the whole video and enjoy it. These cabinets I had already pre-started on, but I figured these would be a good cabinet to start showing you how to do some of the prep work to be ready to primer. If you don't prep it right, your finish is not gonna come out right. On this particular type of cabinet, there's a seam all the way around here and all the way around on the inside. You can see it and you can feel it. You're going to want to hit it with the sander first, and then you're going to want to fill it with your spot putty. And your spot putty shrinks, so leave a little bit of a layer on there. All putty, all that stuff shrinks when it dries. That's how it dries. It's like evaporation. I'm going to go ahead and finish puttying this up, and then I'll show you when I sand it, what I sand it with, and how it looks, how it should look before you start priming it. Now that you've got your cabinet all spot puttied up, this is what it should look like. All these little spots, these are nail holes. The gentleman who made these cabinets did a really good job, and he pre-puttied the nail holes, but all putty sinks, so you'll need to put some more spot putty on those to make it perfectly level. You don't want little divots in your cabinet. Next step is to sand it with a 3M orbital sander with 240 paper on it, hook and loop. I'll sand this and I'll show you what it should look like before you prime it the first time. Now you've sanded your cabinet with your 240 Mirka hook and loop sandpaper. If you notice, I didn't sand all of the Bondo off, the spot putty. You got to leave some on. You're not trying to dig it back out of where you put it in. So this is the prep that's very important. You can tell a good finished place and an okay finished place by the prep before they even primer the cabinets. And I've also gone over the edges with 240 sandpaper. You want to make sure all your edges are broken. If the paint's on a sharp edge, it's a very little paint and the water will go through it. It comes off really easy because it's so thin. So make sure your edges are rolled over a little bit, round it off so you can get a good coat of paint on the edges. This is your cabinet after you've primered it. When you primer it, there shouldn't be any where you see any streaks through it or any red. It should be all covered. It should be a good coat of primer. But what you're going to do is you're going to look around the cabinet now for any defaults in the cabinet, any divots, anything wrong with it at all. You're going to go over it again as good as you can. You'll be putting some more spot putty on it. Then you're going to completely sand the cabinet again. And yes, you're going to go primer it one more time. You're also going to try to take care of these little gaps. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. This is how you get that wow finish. These are the steps you have to take. You don't just go and grab your cabinets and primer them. Do your prep when you first get the cabinets. You're always looking for something wrong. Something wrong with the cabinets. Every cabinet shop, finish shop, should have somebody like quality control. And that would be my wife. She can see stuff from across the shop. If there's something wrong with one of these cabinets, she can see it. All right, getting ready for its second coat of primer. Red spot putty on again, but a lot thinner, just so you can get a guideline when you're sanding around for that seam. You can actually see how the red comes off and see how the seam's gonna end up. We filled in the cracks on the shelves. And what we're gonna sand it with this time, this is the Dynabrade with 320 sandpaper. The reason you're using that is it's not as aggressive as the orbital. And anytime after you got primer on it, you want to use that type of sandpaper, that type of sander. Don't leave swirl marks. The reason you use the orbital in the first one when it's raw, sometimes you're sanding the wood down a little bit. The 320, it takes forever to sand it down. All right, I started sanding on this cabinet. And I thought, well, I'll just show you how I sand it a little bit. I'll sand this side. You notice when I sand this, I don't go over the edge right here because you don't want to go back down to raw wood. Now if I would have primered it without doing all the pre-work I did on it already, it would be sanded back down to raw wood, and that's not what you want. When you primer it, you want the primer to stay on there. That's how the finish lasts a long time. You get durability out of it. And when you're sanding, always wear a mask. I'll be breathing this stuff in. All right, I'm going to show you how to sand this, and then I'm also going to grab the sponge and hand sand it. This is is a sponge that I showed you earlier in the videos, what we use. You're going to go over it and you're going to sand it down. You fill it with your hand, and if you feel any spots that are rough or feel anything on them, you concentrate more on there. You want the whole thing smooth and ready to put another coat of primer on it. Pretty much like if you were going to paint it, but you're not going to paint it. You're going to put one more coat of primer. Like I said, you want it to last. You want it to last for years, and this is how it's done. All right, this side's pretty much ready to put another coat of primer on it. It seems like a lot of steps, but once you get doing it, it goes pretty fast. I'm gonna go ahead and sand the rest of the cabinet. I'm not gonna do it on camera. This is how I'm gonna sand all of it. Ready for another coat of primer. And then after you primer it again, you get to go over it again and look for anything wrong with it. 3 times checking it. If we'd have just primered the first time without doing anything to it, we'd be down to raw wood all around here. You notice there's no raw wood at all. It's all built up with a good coat of primer, and that's what you want. Okay, I finished sanding this cabinet. If you notice, none of the primer's sanded through like it should be. If you do sand through the primer, which it does happen, make sure you spot putty it before you put the next coat on. I was able to fill in the corners so there's no crack on the top, so it looks complete. Before you do that, you got to make sure you wiggle the cabinet and make sure it doesn't move, because if it moves and those joints move, any joint moves, it's going to crack, because this finish does not move, it does not bend. It's a very solid finish. This one we were able to do that. If it would have been loose, we wouldn't be able to do that. You have to leave it like it is, or you just get a big crack line down there. All right, this is what you want right there, right before you last primer. All right, there you go. You know you got a cabinet primered right, prepped right, and ready to paint. And you know it's going to last years, and you're not going to have any problems with it. Alright, while I was doing this, I thought I'd show you guys, because some people don't know the difference when they're getting cabinets between a framed cabinet and a Euro, or some people refer to it as frameless cabinet. There's different ways you tape these off, and there's different ways you prep them to get them primed. And I'll be showing you how to do each one of those. This is your face frame cabinet, prepped and ready to be primered. If you notice, I didn't sand all the putty off, the spot putty. And this is when you use the Merca hook and loop on your orbital sander to sand this down, because you want it a little more aggressive, because you got putty you want to sand off. You want to sand the smooth, the joints, if there's any raises, you want to sand that off. They come in 2 ways, where they're assembled and when they're disassembled. I prefer them disassembled because this is a vanity. Obviously there's a sink up here, and I like to seal the behind the false front, and I also like to seal it like right here. I like to seal that back here, because if there is any water that comes down on there, it's just extra protection. So that's why I like them apart more. Okay, I'll go primer this, see what it looks like after the first primer coat. Cabinet primered with a nice thick coat so that you won't sand back through to the edges or anything, not back down to bare wood. If you do happen to sand down to bare wood, make sure you spot primer it so you have the same coverage of primer everywhere on the cabinet for longevity of the finish, obviously. Now I picked out this cabinet for a couple reasons. I've already went back over it and looked at where I had any flaws that I could see right now, and I'm fixing those with the red putty. You're going to sand it again, and you're going to prime it one more time. And the reason I picked out this cabinet is because I want to explain the false front, why I like them when they come apart, so that I can seal on the back and seal on the inside so that it holds up to water a lot better. And also, and this particular gentleman likes to V-groove his finished ends. And if you've ever done them before, you'll notice that sometimes when the frame meets the panel, there's a line in there. Sometimes there's gaps in the plywood. You can see little black spots. It's where there's holes in there. What we do is we take spackling and you put it on your finger. I've already done this one. And you wipe it down like so. You just keep wiping it until you get all those spots full. You don't want to leave a lot in there. And this is where you use the 320 on the square air sander, because you don't want to be so aggressive with it. All right, you're going to take some worn out sandpaper, your 220 flat sandpaper, worn out a little bit, because you don't want it to be real aggressive. And you're going to fold it and you're going to put it down that groove, and you're going to sand it. You'll see the stuff come off. You'll see how it sands. You get all the little lumps or whatever out of there. This is for a nice, good finish on the line. It comes out super clean, and there's no gaps in there. There's no spots. It just makes a better finish. Makes a higher quality finish. Then you take your sander and you sand it. Then you get your sanding sponges, which I showed you in my other videos, what ones I use. And you'll want to go along and make sure that there's nothing left on top. You'll see it like a film or something on top there. You want to make sure that all that's off so that when you spray this in, there's nothing on here. It's all just perfectly smooth. I'm going to go ahead and finish sanding this and get it ready for paint. Also, when you sand it and you paint it again, you primer it again, you're also going to go over it one more time looking for flaws. And now, since you've seen the process where I put the spot putty on before I even prime it, you know that when you go over, if you're using this translucent paint, or pretty much any of this paint's kind of translucent, you're not going to put enough where you're going to get sag marks, you're not going to get runs. It's going to come out a lot better cabinet if you do it right from the start to the finish. Pay attention. It's what makes the difference between like I said, a wow finish or an okay finish. This is some of the stuff that makes the difference. And you definitely want that wow finish. Here's your cabinet after your second coat of primer. Now you can go over it. You got a nice clean seam. You can go over your cabinet now, and you're going to go over it one more time. You know, facing it in the glare, in the light, sunlight from outside. Not the sun directly on it, but you know, just a sideways view where you can see, you know, what the cabinet looks like. If there's any flaws in it, any imperfections that you can fix, because now's the time you fix it before you put your coat of paint on there. And that's about it. One thing I forgot to tell you also, this is an upper. If these nail holes come and they're not filled, which this gentleman does fill his nail holes, which I prefer before he gets here, we use Timbermate wood filler to fill those in first. It's not as fine grain as the spot putty, but it fills in the majority of the hole, and it shrinks also because it evaporates basically to dry. But that's what we put in to fill the bigger hole. The putty is not made for a big hole like that. And the other thing on uppers is wood on the end, plywood. We go ahead and fill that up with spot putty also. You want these cabinets to look good from the top to the bottom. You don't want somebody bending into the cabinet and they got paint on you can see all the grain and stuff on the plywood. You do that also. It's a little extra step, but it's just something else that makes the finish good and people like it. I hope everybody had a good time in this video. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time. Peace out from the Master Blaster.